Well, it's Testimony Tuesday again, and I've almost let the day get by without giving a testimony today. Um, Yesterday marked 2 weeks from my open heart surgery, and so I just wanted to take this opportunity to give God the glory and to a testimony that just came back to me that I don't think I've shared on here. And I've been talking about how I got to spend time these last 2 weeks with my daughters, and all of our busy schedules. You know how busy we all get. But when there's a crisis, families know how to come together. But our youngest daughter, Morgan, when she was a baby, I was pregnant with her and I started having difficulty. I went into early labor and they tried for like 5 weeks, me being in and out of the hospital, trying to stop that from me from having her too soon. They could tell that even though she was a good sized baby, that her lungs weren't developed. But eventually I ended up having her and they took her from me as soon as she was born. I got to see her, but they took her really quick, and I knew then there was problems, and it was right. Her lungs had just not developed to the point where it could create surfactant that lubricates the lungs inside. And so when you have that, it's like your lungs are like brittle. They said it was like thin parchment, dry parchment paper. And so the doctor had come in my room and showed me the x-rays of her lungs and said, Miss Weeby, Mr. Weeby, we're sitting there, and he said, your baby's lungs are like Swiss cheese. And her lungs have already collapsed twice, and they had already put 2 chest tubes in. That's all they could do. They just when they would collapse, they would just poke a hole in there and cut in there and put a tube in there and tie and sew this tube in her chest. So she had already collapsed twice, and they said she's got the 2 holes that had burst and collapsed, and we already see the other light areas are fixing to go. They're like holes, like Swiss cheese. And all we can do is every time they collapse, is to put a chest tube in. They'd put her on a ventilator to monitor her breathing, to keep it from going too hard or fast and rupturing. It was very critical. But it was crazy back and then. They released me. They made me leave the hospital. They didn't let you stay like they do today. Things are different 39 years ago. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, and I know other mothers and parents have done this, but I had to drive away from that hospital. She was at Flo Hospital in Denton, which is not even there anymore. But I remember driving away, looking up there at that NIC unit and leaving my baby, not knowing if I'd ever see her again. And I remember the second day she was born, Mama was taking me down to see her in the NICU, and I said, Mom, if this baby dies, I'm going to die. I can't live without her. I can't, I've only known her 2 days, but I don't want to live without her. And I had my Joda. It was like, how Joda was 3 at the time, I guess. And, you think she was my everything. But it's weird how when you're in that moment, it's weird how your babies are you already. While they're in you, they're still a part of you. So it's so hard for me to imagine women that abandon their babies. They're damaged. But a normal mother could never do that. You just can't do that. A healthy mother. But anyway, so I had to leave her. And so I would call up there. I just had a line that I'd call, and they'd tell me, how she's doing. And I'd get there as soon as I could in the mornings to get up there and be with her. Then they'd make me leave. And so she was so bad. I don't remember what day it was, and I got up there, and that was that morning. I was walking through those doors, said, Mom, I can't live without her. And I walk into that NIC unit, and she wasn't on her little slab where they had her. And I looked around the room in panic, and this doctor, one of her doctors, come up and said, oh, Miss Weeby, we've got your baby in a bed, or whatever the little things they were slipping, and said, here's what she said, your baby has started healing herself overnight. I mean, believe me, Gary had spent the night in the chapel at the hospital. He was praying. He wouldn't even leave, praying in there. And that next morning, when we didn't know she's going to live or die, she was so critical, said, your daughter has started healing herself overnight. I looked at that doctor and I said, oh no, God has healed our baby. God has healed our baby. And so they had told me that she'd be there at least 2 months. I'd had to go home and I'd be up in the night and I'd be calling. And I remember I was just praying, God, get those tubes out of her because they looked so bad, those terrible looking tubes with those sutures. And I'd called at that morning. I prayed all during the night, God, and they said, Miss Weeby, if you get up here by this time, we've got the tubes out of her, and you can feed your baby. I mean, we flew to Denton as far as we could get there, and I got to hold her really got to hold her, and was able to feed our baby, and we had her home in 11 days. So I think about all the people who've set those nurseries with those little babies and prayed for them, and so many didn't get to take their babies home. But those are one that God had willed for Morgan to live in this world, and to see her now a grown woman and doing the things she does in life, just watching her. I'm just watching her, and she was born with this head full of dark hair. I mean, she had much hair as me, I think, when she was born, and she's still got that kind of hair. And I just thank God for the testimonies and how he saved her life. And for whatever purpose he has for a time as this, God is able. I don't know what you're going through today, but as soon as we just got to remember back when God did the miraculous. And they're not always those kind of big testimonies, but Morgan's birth and her healing and her miracle is part of our story, one of those biggies in our life.